Welcome to our show today, The Home Care Companion. I am Dawn Benninghove, registered nurse, owner of Companion Extraordinary Home Care, and your host for today. We are going to be talking about tools for your toolbox and how you can use them in everyday life with seniors who have dementia. Today our guest is Sergeant Tim Sutton. He has been with the Hanover County Sheriff's Department in Hanover, Virginia for 27 years now, and he is the officer in charge of Project Lifesaver for the Hanover Sheriff's Office. Tim, welcome. We're really glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's jump in. Tell us about Project Lifesaver. What is this wonderful program?
Well, I got told by the sheriff at the time, it was 2002, the sheriff of Hanover County, Stuart Cook, that I was going to be running a program, and it was to deal with individuals who wandered off or eloped and got away from caregivers or family members. I knew not a whole lot about those topics, dealing with the wandering and elopement and the cognitive issues, but that next year, the beginning of the next year, our agency, myself, as well as 15 other officers, went through a 3-day course called Project Lifesaver that dealt with that issue. And what it mainly entailed was going out to meet families who had a family member, which we call clients. They are our clients, dealing with a cognitive issue, and they would just take off, elope, wander off. And what we would do was meet with the family, get some information, and give them a transmitter and put it on their wrist or their ankle. And they would wear that 24/7. It runs off of its radio frequency. It's not GPS. And should they go missing, the caregiver calls us immediately. They don't go out and search for hours on their own looking for their loved one. They call us immediately to get us on the way. And we can actually go out and track and locate that missing individual, and bring them home safely.
Now, you said it is radio frequency. It's not GPS, correct?
Correct.
So I had always assumed it was GPS. So how different is that? Why is it important to have radio frequency?
Well, the GPS is a great tool, and people are using it all over the place, all over the world. It is a great tool. However, if any of you out there who, have a satellite radio in your car, and you're going down the interstate, happen to go underneath of an overpass, you might notice that you lose that signal briefly. That's because that overpass is keeping the satellites from being able to pick that signal up. Now, if somebody with a cognitive disorder, a dementia, autism, goes out and they just decide to lay down and go to sleep, or just sit and rest and take a break, and they go up underneath one of those overpasses, you're not going to get a signal. You're not going to know where they might be. The radio frequency signals are sent out horizontally along the ground, and they transmit. They do not transmit all over the world. They transmit about a mile, half a mile to a mile. So it's not like we're tracking somebody all the time. There are programs out there that do use GPS, and like I said, it's a great tool. But what you have to do is actually be able to locate that little transmitter. It's great if it's attached to a person, because it's a whole lot easier to find. But we are trying to track that little transmitter that's on that ankle or that wrist.
Tell me about a typical inquiry. I mean, does everyone qualify for this? I know you're saying cognitive disorder like Alzheimer's, but if my father had Parkinson's with the dementia that comes with that. Right. So how would he have qualified for this type of program?
Well, what you would do for Hanover is call 365-6140. That is our dispatcher. Tell them that you're interested in gathering some information about Project Lifesaver. Myself or one of the other deputies who's trained up in the program will contact you and pretty much tell us your story about what's going on, what you're dealing with, what if there is a diagnosis or there is a potential diagnosis, and just carry on that conversation with the officer. We would like to know if there have been issues with them wandering previously, but just tell us what's going on in your life. We do not require everybody give us a medical letter from a doctor, because the disorders and diseases are frustrating enough, and for us to come in and say, hey, we need documentation to prove it. We kind of evaluate what's going on in your world and how you're struggling dealing with it. I can't think of anybody we've actually turned down. Every single person has called us to really ask. It's been a legitimate issue. I have had some parents call worried about their child wandering off and somebody taking their child, when in fact that's not the point of the program. Because if somebody were to take your child or take your loved one and saw something on their wrist or ankle, they're going to immediately cut it off, throw it out of the window. So it's not to deal with, okay, we need to go find my daughter. She's in the car. We don't know where she is. It's to deal with these issues, these disorders and diseases, and just tell us your story. And it might be a situation where they're not a wanderer or eloper, but all of our officers in Hanover, they receive training on Alzheimer's and dementia, as well as autism and other disabilities. So we may be able to advise you. One of the things I think is amazing is when people call the police that are dealing with this, and they realize that officer can speak intelligently with them about what they're dealing with. I think that's a source of comfort, and I love that our sheriff's office is able to provide that.
I love it too. And we have had with Companion Extraordinaire our clients who have had the Project Lifesaver program. And those families have just been so grateful to have the ability to hope that should their loved one wander away from home, that they would have this ability to get them back safely and quickly. So tell me a little bit more about that, as far as how quickly can you find someone? 100% of the time, 90% of the time?
So far with Project Lifesaver International, they're all over the world. The average time to locate a missing person, the average is 30 minutes. Now, we've done searches, and I've been involved in many searches for people who did not have Project Lifesaver. And what you end up needing is hundreds of people calling your officers out to set up in line formation or something, or walk through the woods and check here and check there. And the manpower hours are extraordinary. In 2011, I don't know if locally we had a search for a boy with autism who went missing for 5.5 days. And it was the largest search in Virginia. So you can imagine the manpower hours and the money that was spent, when in fact, if somebody has that transmitter and we get called as soon as that caregiver realizes they're missing, not waiting 2 hours to call us to come look, but calls us immediately, the average time is 30 minutes to bring that loved one home safe.
And I know from being a nurse and working with seniors, especially who have some type of dementia, cognitive disorder, most people are found within a mile or so of their home. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's just awesome that you all have that ability. And I do want to say that it's quite an amazing feat that you all at the Hanover County Sheriff's Office were the first agency back in 2003 in Virginia to bring the International Project Lifesaver to our area. I know it started in Chesapeake, but to really get that program up and going. And I'm excited to be able to give this information to everyone because of that ability to locate so many seniors. So we've talked about the requirements for participation, that they can just really give you a call. Do they get to talk to you directly?
Some of them can. With me realizing I'm not going to be here forever, I'm trying to train up other officers in the department to be able to handle the day-to-day operations of Project Lifesaver. I've got a lot of deputies that are very passionate about helping the families and working with the families, and they understand what some of the caregivers are going through. I think all the deputies understand that the caregivers are going through a lot, but you don't want every deputy to be exactly the same. Some of them want to be out there arresting people, bad guys, and enforcing traffic, and that is their thing. We don't want everybody to be exactly the same, but I have some very passionate officers who see Project Lifesaver, see training other officers as extremely important, and they are ready to do anything and everything they can to help run this program.
It does take a truly special person. You really have to have a heart, especially for the seniors who have dementia, to be able to take that on and just really be there for them. So one of the questions I thought about was, is there a story that perhaps jumps to your mind and really shows how the program worked from beginning to end? Can you share that?
Yeah, I have had a number of opportunities and to work with the families and deal with the families. And I'll tell you, Project Lifesaver is amazing in the fact that you can go out and track people and find them and bring them home. Again, we're not tracking them 24/7. This is a safety net, pretty much, to help keep them safe. It's not a cure-all, but it is a step in the right direction. But I did on one occasion have a gentleman who'd come into town with his wife to visit his daughter and stay with them for a few months. And it was very interesting. He went missing while he was here, disappeared. The family called us. We went out and we started to do our search and rescue mission. He was not in Project Lifesaver, so it was a full-blown search and rescue mission. And we went out. It was a very rural area and searched for about an hour and a half and ended up locating him about a mile down the road. And he was actually sitting in a car in somebody's driveway. I believe he wanted to go home. And that's one thing you'll hear a lot of times with dementia. They want to go home. Well, they may go around and open doors of cars and just get in expecting to be taken somewhere. We've found a lot of people who've gone missing sitting in cars where down the street with the next door neighbors. But one thing, I went in with the family and I asked the daughter if her dad had Alzheimer's. And she said, no, he's got a cognitive disorder that causes him to lose his short-term memory. Well, that's the definition of Alzheimer's. But I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to sit there. It's a stressful situation. I'm not going to challenge her. He's dealing with a form of dementia. Let's find him. So after about an hour and a half, we did find him in the driveway sitting in a car and brought him home. And I actually, at that point, Hanover, I decided at that point, when he's coming to town, he needs a transmitter on. So the daughter agreed, the family agreed. So what we would do when he would come to town for 5 or 6 months, I would go out and we'd put a transmitter on him so we could locate him should he go missing. And when he went back to his home state, we would recover it and hang on to it. And when he came back again, we'd do it again. Because the last thing I wanted to do was have him wander off. We go up there and conduct a huge search, not finding him. Because like you said, you could search the area as well as you can search with so many people. But many times they are found within a mile of where the point last seen, wherever they were last seen. We don't need that happening. So I would accommodate the family for their, peace of mind. Plus, it helps us to be able to locate them. But it was interesting. About a couple of years later, I got a call from the daughter who had told me, and she told me she'd written a book about being a caregiver for somebody with Alzheimer's. And it kind of boggled my mind because she denied that her dad had Alzheimer's when I first met her. So she'd written a book and had written a chapter about the Hanover Sheriff's Office, Project Lifesaver, and myself. And I went out to her house to meet her. And with the look of confusion on my face, I guess, I asked her if she remembered the first question I asked her the first time we met. And she did. I said, I asked you if your dad had Alzheimer's, and you said no. And she said she was not allowed to say the word Alzheimer's because her mother and other family members would not accept the fact that her dad had Alzheimer's.
That is a really hard thing for people to hear. And I understand that 100%. I want to bring out a point, which is when you talked about that he said, her father, said he wanted to go home.
Yes.
And we see that all the time where clients say, I want to go home, I want to go home. And we believe, and what I saw with my father was, they want something familiar. Do you agree with that, Tim?
Right. I believe going home for some is actual location. The problem is it may be where they grew up, where they lived 30 years ago. To them, in their mind, that's home. The scary part is if they were to get to that location, it's probably not going to look as it did back then, and they may very well not recognize it, and they keep going. But I also feel like, they're looking for something that is familiar. They're looking for a way to just relax. And when I teach my classes, I tell officers, I tell whoever's in the class, I said, if you left and came here to this class this morning and got halfway here and realized you'd used the stove, and you're thinking, did I turn the stove off? I don't remember turning the stove off. So that's eating at you. You're wondering, okay, am I going to go to class or am I going to go check? Well, I'm running late, so I'm going to class. And I said, the whole time you're sitting here, you're waiting for the phone to ring, and you're going to hear the fire department call you and say, hey, we're where your house used to be. Your mind, you're preoccupied. You're worried about that. I said, that person with dementia has that nagging feeling 24/7 because something's just not right. They know they're forgetting things, but they don't know what they're forgetting. And that nagging feeling is with them 24/7. The big difference is you can go back and check the stove. There's nothing they can do to get rid of that feeling. So they're looking for something to make them just feel comfortable, relaxed, no worries, and they can't get to that place.
the other question I had too was, I think sometimes that when we see others who've heard that a loved one has wandered off or gotten lost, that it's that person's fault, that daughter or that wife or that caregiver who allowed them to wander off. And that's not really the case at all, is it?
No, it's not. And I feel like there's been such a wall built up. I think so many people out there in the community, especially caregivers, they worry. They don't want to bother the police. They don't want to bother. This is, something I'm dealing with. They don't have time to deal with, what I'm struggling with. And they're very hesitant to call 911. They will go out and search for 2-3 hours for that missing person and then get to the point where they call 911. Well, that's 3 hours we've got to catch up on. Average person can walk 4 miles an hour. And if somebody with dementia is on a mission to get somewhere, to go home, they're going to be, they may walk with a walker or use a cane, but at that point, many times they're going to be walking at a good pace. So they're scared to call us and figure we don't have time to deal with what they're dealing with. We've got bigger issues. But I think the great thing in Hanover is being able to build these relationships with these families and encourage them, look, call us. I've sat on the side of the road talking to many caregivers who are struggling and dealing with things, and they're crying and they're venting and they're going off. And I tell them, anytime you need to talk to somebody, vent, let it all out, call me. I'm an impartial party. But you've got to get it out, because if you don't, you're going to wear yourself out. Next thing you know, you're going to be in the hospital looking up these bright lights. And in your mind, you're the best caregiver for your loved one. And you're wondering who's taking care of them now. So I love being able to build these relationships. Project Lifesaver is amazing because it allows you to go find people that are missing and bring them home. But I think the biggest part of the program and how we run it, we come out once a month and change the batteries and those little transmitters. But it gives us an opportunity to interact with the caregiver and the family. And we can speak intelligently to them about what they're dealing with because we've had that training. As you alluded to earlier, you have a toolbox. Police officers, we have a belt. It's another tool to put on your belt to be able to help you do your job. But I think the biggest part of Project Lifesaver and the way Hanover has impacted the community is the relationships we've been able to build with the families.
I agree. Now, however, we have so many listeners who are outside of Hanover County.
Right.
How can they access a program such as this?
I would encourage them to contact their public safety agency and find out if they have the program. We've run across a lot of people who just did not know it was there. Contact them. Let them know it's available. They can go to projectlifesaver.org, and it's all the information there. It's a nonprofit, and they can get involved in Project Lifesaver. And, again, it's a minimal cost compared to what it costs to search for somebody for 5.5 days. I can promise you that. But it does allow it's a great tool to show the community that you care about what they're dealing with. And what I have found, even though most people don't want to talk about their struggles with this at home, many officers in my classes, when I start the class, they're not really thrilled about the topic. They figure, oh my gosh, I've got to listen to this. And by the time we're done with the class, they come up and say, I've been a police officer for 20 years. This is the best class I've ever had. And I always ask the class, I say, I want you to tell me, if you feel comfortable, how many of you have a family member or have had a family member dealing with a form of dementia? And about 90% of the hands come up. Mm. So every single person is either personally or professionally affected by dementia. And we need to understand what we're dealing with to be able to handle it properly.
Agreed, 100%. And this is such an incredible program that we do have in Hanover, but because it is Project Lifesaver and it is an international program, there is an opportunity for people out there to be able to contact. And thank you so much for giving us that website to be able to do that. So I know this is such a passion for you, Tim. And if people do want to know more, other than going to the website, is there anything else they can do when you talk about contacting the public safety office? Is that through the police department?
I would check with your local law enforcement agency. There are some places where the fire departments fire and EMS are involved. And there are also some locations where civic organizations have initiated the program and they run it. And then the officers have equipment that they can do the tracking. So they just come out and do the tracking, but civic organizations handle the maintenance, the battery changes and things. But what I like about ours is we get that face-to-face contact with the families, with the caregivers. I'll tell you, I had a gentleman who was placed in the program at one point who was in World War II, and he collected hats. According to his daughter, he collected hats, loved hats. And she said, but I don't think there's any way he's going to wear that. He's not going to wear that transmitter on his wrist. I said, well, let's give it a shot. So it was very interesting. I had a conversation with him, and I told him if I came back in a month and he still had it on, he could have the hat that was on my head. And I did not expect him to hold on to that memory. But a month later, I came back, and when I pulled up in the driveway, he came out. He walked up and had his hand out. He did not remember my name or anything. The one thing he remembered was that I owed him a hat. And we actually had him go missing one time. And it was before the son or daughter had realized he was missing. And once the call came out, one of the deputies was headed towards the house and saw this man walking down the double yellow line of a 2-lane road wearing one of the sheriff's office hats, and knew, here he is, I've got him. So got him in the car and brought him. He was going to the store to get candy, and there was no store within probably 10 miles. So I've given a lot of those hats out. It's one of those things where you do what you got to do. You do everything you can. And if you don't think somebody's going to wear the transmitter, I joke, some of the ladies think it might clash with their jewelry or something. So I always try to find alternative means. And we actually had one lady who would not leave the house without a pocketbook. They knew she would not leave the house with a pocketbook. So she would not wear it on her ankle or wrist. But what I told the family to do is get rid of every pocketbook except one. And what I did was took that pocketbook, cut a hole inside of it with Velcro, put the transmitter down in there, and once a month I'd come out and get the pocketbook and change the battery. So you have to be very creative. I don't think I've ever been inside the box. I spend most of my life outside the box. But I want to do what I can do, and my deputies want to do what they can do to help make your situation as best as possible.
What a connection. Thank you so much, Sergeant Sutton, for being with us today. It is just such an incredible program, and I appreciate all our listeners as well. I am Dawn Benninghove, your host for the Home Care Companion. We hope we have added another tool for your toolbox today. And for more information about Companion Extraordinaire Home Care Services, you can visit our website at www.cenninc.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcasts, downloaded straight to your device each week.